Hello friends and fellow bibliophiles, welcome back to Kat's Novel Adventures. Today I am wrapping up all of the books that I read in June. I read a total of 9 books in June, and they were all either 4 or 5 stars. So I would say I had a stellar month of reading. Get it? Stellar? Lots of stars? I know I'm cracking myself up. Anyhow, I started the month of June off by participating in Kelsi's Killer Corn Readathon. I happen to be a Kelsi Corn, which means I am a patron of her channel, Slime and Slashers. And she hosted a mini readathon that was called the Killer Corn Readathon, and it was all about reading slasher books. Now, you did not have to read strictly slashers, and I personally only read one. However, I earned my Killer Corns and I did a whole entire vlog about how I went about doing that. So I'm only going to mention the books that I read for that readathon and not really go into detail, but I will leave a link in the description box below if you would like to check out my Killer Corn Readathon vlog. I had a lot of fun during that period of time. I got to go to a Duran Duran concert. It just was marvelous all around. So here are the books that I read for that, and the first one was Welcome to Camp Nightmare by R.L. Stine. I will say it was my first 5-star Goosebumps book, and it was really, really good. It is my favorite so far of the Goosebump books that I have read so far. Then I read 2 novellas out of The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. I read Dolly, that has to do with a very strange doll and some dire consequences, as well as The Man in the Picture, that is about a man who purchases a very mysterious picture that you don't want to own it. Let's just put it that way, because it does affect people, especially married people. And then the last book, oh, and I must say, Dolly got a 4-star and The Man in the Picture got a 4.5 star. And then my last book, but certainly not least, was My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. And this was my first novel by Stephen Graham Jones, and it was fantastic. It takes place in a small town. It has slasher vibes all over it, and it has a wonderful character named Jay Daniels. But I will say, again, check out my Killer Corn Readathon vlog, and you can learn more about all of my feelings about these wonderful books that I read for that special reading event. So let's talk about the other books that I read in June. The first one I want to talk about is The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. This is for my Year of Christie reading project. Love this book, 5 stars. It features Hercule Poirot. It's actually his debut. He is smart, very observant, and may I say, dresses impeccably. Very patient as well. Our narrator of the story is Mr. Hastings. He is going to Styles to visit his friend, John Cavendish, who happens to live with his stepmother, Mrs. Inglethorpe, as well as some other people and his stepbrother. While Mr. Hastings is visiting, Mrs. Inglethorpe is poisoned and dies. Of course, you know what happens with murder. Everybody becomes a suspect, especially in this case, the new young husband. Well, Mr. Hastings finds out that Hercule Poirot has actually settled in the countryside, and he asks him to please assist with the case. Well, I'm gonna say lots of twists and turns. I tried so hard to pay attention. I think I should have written down some clues because I kind of forgot a couple of things, and because of that, I did not get to guess the murderer again. I mean, Agatha Christie really is the queen of red herrings. I really loved it. I loved the introduction of Hercule Poirot, and I even loved the friendly banter between Poirot as well as Mr. Hastings, because Mr. Hastings is trying to be an amateur sleuth as well. Wonderful book. I would highly recommend it to anyone who has not read it, and it will give you feels for what kind of a mystery writer Miss Christie is. For the middle grade March book club, the ladies chose The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson. This book is incredible. It's fast-paced, it's historical fiction, but it's interlaced with an intriguing mystery. I loved it. It is about a young girl named Candace who, with her mother, travels to Lambert, South Carolina from Atlanta. They're going to stay in her grandmother's home. Her grandmother died a few years before, and while their home is being renovated, they decide to spend the summer here. Well, Candace discovers that her grandmother was involved in a scandal in Lambert. She was actually the city manager at one time, and she receives a letter from a mysterious James Parker that is tied to a mystery that, if it is solved, means lots of money for the town. Unfortunately, her grandmother does not solve the mystery. She gets herself in trouble, disgraces her name, and she gets fired. So now Candace happens to come upon that letter and decides she is going to try to solve the mystery and clear her grandmother's name and also try to find this fortune. Well, she has a partner in crime, so to speak. Her new friend, Brandon, lives across the street. They discover they have a love of reading, which I love when you read a story that involves libraries or reading books, and there are lots of middle grade books that are mentioned in the story, including The Weston Game, which is one of my favorites, and it is written by Ellen Raskin. Well, Varian Johnson was inspired by The Weston Game to write The Parker Inheritance. So there are riddles, and it has those Weston Game vibes, which I really loved. But anyway, through a lot of research and reading, they make a lot of discoveries. Now, this book is told in dual timelines. The characters, which I think they are all well written, you also get multiple perspectives from those characters. So you have the story told of what happens in the past, what prompts James Parker to do what he did, and while this friendship that Candace and Brandon have is a wonderful friendship, you learn a lot of heartbreaking things along the way of what happened to some of these people in Lambert. I think that has to do with a lot of the history of the time, and then also some of the social justice issues that happen, you know, whether it's still today or back in the past. But Varian Johnson really does write it in a wonderful way. He makes it to where it's thought-provoking and heartfelt, but he does it in a clever and entertaining way, and I really like that. I love the friendship between Candace and Brandon. I love the secrets that are revealed, and it really was an interesting book. I would like to read more by Varian Johnson. This was a 5-star read for me, one that I would recommend to anyone who likes historical fiction, who likes mysteries, because I don't think you'd be disappointed with reading it. For the FOMO book club, the ladies chose for their May-June selection The Dance Tree by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. This is a compelling historical fiction novel that's set against the backdrop of a mystifying dance plague that took place in 16th century Strasbourg, France. The story really is about a young pregnant woman named Lisbeth who lives on the outskirts of Strasbourg on a small farm where she is a beekeeper and lives with her husband and mother-in-law, Sophie. The circumstances of this time period is not the best because a natural incident that happened causes the summer to be brutally hot. Living conditions are horrendous for many of the people, and there are a lot of demands that are made upon the people, especially women at this time, by the church. And then we have the story of Lisbeth's sister-in-law, Agatha, who was sent away for many years for a crime against the church, basically. And she has been sent away in a period of penance. but then she returns. Because of her return, it opens some old wounds and it causes a lot of dire consequences, and then you have this dance plague that's happening in the town. So it kind of creates a lot of chaos going on there. Hargrave does a wonderful job with the story, and she does tackle many different topics, but I think she does it very well. We learn a lot about the attitudes of society back then, the feelings towards women as well as foreigners. And it is disheartening that the church does a lot of things that are not very church-like in the name of God. Like they use God to be able to enforce some of the things that they do, which is not right. But Hargrave, you know, even though this story has a melancholy tone, there's a lot of bleakness to it, I really did enjoy getting to know Lisbeth. I loved her female relationships with her mother, with her best friend Ida, getting to know Agatha because she didn't know her until she returned, you know, back from the place that she was doing her penance, and also the strained relationship that she has with Sophie. And I will say the characters do change. You see growth and you see changes within those relationships as the story goes on. Also, I did enjoy learning the backstories of why these women joined the dance, why they were compelled to do that. And it is heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking. But despite the bleakness, despite being a hard read, Hargrave does end it on a more hopeful note. I mean, it really is a story about abiding love and female connection. And then when women are able to find their voice or a level of control that they can make it, and then they exert that power that they really do have, it is refreshing. And it does leave you a little more hopeful by the end of the book. This was a 5-star read for me because it was very well written. I will mention that they don't mention this in the description, and when I attended the book club meeting, this was something we all pretty much agreed on, that it should have been mentioned that Lisbeth had miscarried numerous times. And so the baby that she is carrying has much significance throughout the novel. So I'm just letting you be aware of that just in case that would trigger you, especially if you've experienced miscarriage in your own life. It is a significant part of Lisbeth's story, and it is talked about throughout. And it does really have to do with her relationship between her mother-in-law as well as her husband, which is kind of sad in a way. But if you like historical fiction and you're interested in unusual circumstances, you know, like a dance plague, I would recommend it. But just know that it is a hard read, but in my opinion, it's worthwhile. It really is a worthwhile read, and I'm glad that they chose it because I don't think I would have ever picked it up because I had never heard of it or the author. The last book that I read was a lot of fun. It is way more lighthearted than The Dance Tree, kind of like a reading palate cleanse, let's just say. But it is also a genre that is outside of my comfort zone, but I had a lot of fun with it. It is My Perfect Hero by Emma Bennett. This is a cozy contemporary romance that has some old-fashioned vibes to it. It is about a young romance writer named Bronte who lives in the English countryside in a charming cottage with her cat, Mr. Darcy. She has recently had a breakup that has leaving her with not wanting to just date anyone. She's looking for her perfect hero. Well, a little while goes by and a really handsome Irishman ends up moving in next to her. His name is Ryan Murphy. And if you watch my mid-year book freakout tag, you'll know that Ryan Murphy is my literary crush because he is very charming and a wonderful guy. Well, Bronte doesn't want him to be in her life any more than just a friend. And one day she's out walking, kind of contemplating things, and she injures herself. And who comes along but the dashing Sebastian Fairfax, on horseback, may I add. Well, she decides he's everything that I want in a boyfriend. On paper, that might appear so. So then Bronte has a dilemma, because while on one hand Ryan has some qualities that she enjoys, Sebastian also has some qualities she enjoys. I really enjoyed it. It has witty dialogue, it's well written, very humorous, just like the author. I've become friends with Emma Bennett, and I can see her humor in her own life reflected in the novel, which I think is great fun. Even though the story is predictable, there is dimension to it. There's heart, there's humor. It just was a lot of fun. And I will say, even though Bronte is a romance writer, she's better at writing her romances than figuring out romance in her personal life. In fact, her cat, Mr. Darcy, seems a little more intuitive than she does. But it was a 5-star read for me, a perfect summer read. It's not very long, and really it has opened my eyes up to other romance novels, because this one is a clean romance. It is not steamy. I don't mind reading a clean romance. So I will definitely be picking up more of Emma Bennett's books in the future. This summer, I am participating in my first summer book bingo. This is a summer-long reading event hosted by Tiffany at Beautiful Minutia. I'm having so much fun with this event. I'm hoping to get blackout, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But I did get my first bingo. But let me share the books from my June reads that actually earned a spot on my bingo board. The first book is Most Recent Unread Purchase, and I used The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson for this spot. For the summer camp prompt, I used Welcome to Camp Nightmare by R.L. Stine. Now, those are not the ones that earned me my bingo. The next 5 are what earned it. And the first one is Read a Novella or Short Story, and I used The Man in the Picture by Susan Hill. This is a novella from my Ghost Story collection. For Outside Your Comfort Zone, I used My Perfect Hero by Emma Bennett. For 2 E's in the title, I used The Dance Tree by Kieran Millwood Hargrave. For mystery, I used The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. And last but not least, for the seaside or island setting prompt, I used A Princess of Wind and Wave by Melanie Sellier. So I really am proud of myself, because many of those books earned me a spot on my bingo board, and it's been a lot of fun. Well, friends, that's a wrap on what I read for June. Thanks for stopping by. I really do appreciate you. Did you happen to read any of the books that I mentioned in my wrap-up? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were about them. Until our paths cross again, stay amazing and be adventurous.